online education in America, virtual schools versus blended schools. Since the early part of this century, online schools have been seen as an answer to ever-tightening budgets, crowded classrooms, needed innovation in education, personalization of the learning experience, and an alternative to the formal environment of the classroom. They are now available in some way at every level of the learning process, from kindergarten through graduate school, including continuing education and professional training. Our discussion today will focus on the K-12 level of training. A search for current numbers was unfruitful, and the 2011 number is questioned, but these disparities justify the call for greater accountability in online education to report enrollments and other academic data in a timely and accurate manner. We're going to be comparing virtual schools and the blended classroom as teaching methods. The questions: how effective are each of these instructional models? And what are the consequences they pose for the future of education? In other words, are they effective in their methods? Virtual schools. In a full-time virtual school delivers all curriculum and instruction via the internet and electronic communication, usually asynchronously with students at home and teachers at a remote location. They are not necessarily online at the same time, though. The blended classroom model has many different methods of implementation, since it can involve students using online resources before, during, or after face-to-face instructional time in a classroom setting. There are many discussions concerning how to implement this model, but that is not the purpose of this discussion. In order to understand our discussion better, we need to understand the types of schools that are going to be discussed. We have state government schools, which occur on the district level, local area public schools, or on the charter level, which are semi-independent local public schools. Then we have the private schools. We have a non-profit sector, which is operated by a church or non-profit corporation, and then we have a for-profit sector, which is operated by a private individual or corporation as a business. Each year, the National Educational Policy Center evaluates education in America. Much of the information for this project has come from their 2016 and 2017 reports, which were released in April for the previous year. They gather their data from reports given by each state's Department of Education and have found inconsistencies which make it difficult to be accurate and consistent with their reporting. Blended learning schools haven't been around as long, nor do they have as many students enrolled. However, the growth rate is still impressive, with growth from more or less 1,000 to 26,000 plus in under 5 years. Part of this is slower growth rate versus the virtual schools is due to the requirements of costly brick and mortar or physical classrooms, with the included staffing and infrastructure requirements. Here is a table that shows the data from the 2013-14 school year for virtual schools and blended schools. In 2015-2016, we can see a yearly increase of 18% in the number of schools, 7% in the number of students, and 3% in the number of states that had virtual schools. For blended schools, we have a yearly increase in schools of 61%, increase in students of 40%, and the increase in the number of states that have blended schools by 31%. One of the concerns that has been raised about these methods of education is the student-teacher ratio. The national average in public education is 16 to 1. In virtual schools, the average for all is 34 to 1. For-profit schools, it's 44 to 1, and for nonprofit schools, it's 19.5 to 1. In blended schools, the only number available was 33 to 1. On-time graduation rates. This is the national average in public education is 82.3%, and that is the amount of students who will graduate within 4 years of starting 9th grade. In virtual schools, the average is, by comparison, rather dismal, 43.4%. And looking down at the different sectors of virtual schools, the numbers are not much different. In blended schools, the average is 43.1%, almost identical. Both of these are nearly half of what the national average in public education is, and they raise cause for concern. Academic performance. Academic performance measured the percent of schools whose average academic performance was at an acceptable level of academic competency. As we look at the data, we must remember that blended schools tended to be in urban areas with lower income students versus virtual schools' demographics being closer to the state averages. This is a typical good news, bad news scenario, but mostly bad news. Virtual schools continue to underperform academically, including in comparison to blended schools. The bright spot is the nonprofit blended schools and the for-profit blended schools. Overall, blended schools scored nearly twice the virtual schools' rate. Certification is another issue. Less than 40% of online teachers had professional development. Teaching online requires different methods and skills not taught in normal teacher education programs. As a point of interest for many of you, in the United States, each of the 50 states does its own teacher certification. The national government has no control over this process, which complicates the process of implementing educational policies across the nation. In 2012, only 10 universities offered certifications in online education. By 2016, 9 states required that certification, and 37 universities offered them. Of those 9 states, 2 did not offer any programs in the education sector to allow for their teachers to become certified. A summary of the current curriculum requirements for K-12 online teaching endorsements that was found online. 1 is technical skills, operating the computers. 2 is instructional design, how to design courses to be used in this manner. 3 is online pedagogy, teaching online coursework. 4 is ethics, how to teach the students ethics, copying and accounting and using resources properly. Online and blended learning, general knowledge. And then the last one was online practical experience was required for each of these programs. We have shown that there are some problems. And let's review these problems quickly. Number 1, we see underperformance. There's a low percentage of schools achieving minimum standards. 2 is teacher-student ratios. They are too high to give students the amount of time they need individually. The completion times, they're below median rate of on-time graduations. Then we have a high growth rate. Growth is faster than quality teachers can be trained. Then there's a lack of certification requirements. Less than 20% of the states have requirements. And there's a lack of educational institutions with programs, which makes it difficult to get certification. Consequences of not achieving minimum competencies in schools. First of all, the students lack 21st century skills. Graduates will be unable to compete in the job market with those who graduate from normal high schools. That brings on a lack of opportunities. in work, education, training, and opportunities for advancement. All of this leads to a lack of adequate income, which contributes to a higher rate of poverty, greater dependence on social services, poorer health, and a greater cost to the taxpayer and society. All of these lead to a lower quality of life. Something should be done. From the research, it appears that both models have their problems. The 40% growth in blended learning enrollments seems to be deserved, especially among the nonprofit schools due to their 100% academic performance achievement. However, guidance needs to be taken with virtual schools to ensure quality is improved so that the students can be ensured of equal access to a higher quality of life. Let's look at some of the recommendations. The National Educational Policy Center recommends that we stop or slow the growth of virtual schools until reasons for poor performance are researched and corrected. To regulate the sizes of the schools and the classes to increase the quality of instruction interaction. Sanctions should be levied against schools which consistently underperform. And they recommend we study and emulate successful nonprofit methods used in blended learning. Others recommend better teacher training and certification for online teachers and more university programs for online certification. The past can give America direction for the future, but we mustn't focus only there. As we look at virtual schools and blended classrooms, let's examine and build on the lessons learned from both their successes and failures in order to provide a better future for America's children. They shouldn't miss out on the benefits possible in the future because we don't act now. Thank you for joining us.